One of my greatest privileges as executive minister of Mennonite Church Manitoba is visiting our congregations, whether for a Sunday morning worship service or connecting with a pastor, a church council chair, or a church committee. It's a special joy for me because I get to see our congregations in all our wondrous diversity, while also seeing the strong threads that unite us. One of those threads that unites us is this: God is at work among us, prompting and prodding us toward ever greater faithfulness to Jesus, walking in His way of faith and hope and love. Exactly what this looks like is different for each congregation, but it is true of every one of our churches. It's also true of us as a regional church, our shared ministries as a community of congregations. God is at work among us. God is even now prompting and prodding us in ways old and new toward ever greater faithfulness to Jesus. This prompting and prodding by the Spirit is not always comfortable, and it will take us into unfamiliar territory. But this path is exactly where we need to be. In the video reports that follow, you'll see some of what this is looking like in our congregations, in our regional church, across our nationwide church, and even around the world. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy the show. Oh, and don't forget to silence your phone.
Well, hi there. When Jeff and I started working as MCM co-directors of leadership ministries back in August, we learned that Rick Neufeld, our predecessor, got your attention, at least tried to, at the delegate session by playing hockey. Well, no offense to you, Rick, but we actually think that curling is more of a showstopper than hockey will ever be.
So, here we are, standing in a curling rink, trying to catch your attention. We're sporty too. We're kind of like a mixed doubles team, don't you think?
Well, you know, you got to keep up with the Joneses.
Ugh.
I've got my hack wake down already.
Maybe we should move on to the report now. As co-directors of leadership ministries, Karen and I serve the MCM community by supporting and equipping our pastors and spiritual leaders.
So looking ahead at the coming year, here are some of the larger things we see ourselves working on.
We anticipate more interest emerging in exploring collaborative forms of ministry. Like a perfect draw to the button, see what I did there? Congregational ministry is work best done in collaboration with others. Some sweep, some call line, and communication is key.
Well, communication is key. And we've noticed that many pastors want to move away from the hierarchical structure of leadership, preferring instead to work together as equals, sharing the load, even taking turns holding the broom. One person can't always have the hammer, you know. For good reasons, most pastors cannot work the 50 to 60-hour weeks the pastors of old worked. Congregations are finding all kinds of ways to support their pastors and their families.
As Sunday morning worship attendance is reducing it for some of our churches, pastors and congregations are getting creative, worshiping and collaborating on service opportunities with other congregations, having worship services in basements around tables to allow for plenty of time for interaction, sharing financial and people resources. We've quickly learned that because a church has become smaller doesn't mean it isn't thriving. Our hope is to empower our pastors to lean into these initiatives further.
Well, Jeff, you know, I think we've run out the time clock, and I don't think we get any extra ends on this one. In a nutshell, we love our jobs, we are honored to pastor our pastors and walk with congregations as they embody Christ's life together in this place. And Jesus is the center.
You mean the button?
Oh.
Together, in 2022, we made numerous good investments, particularly in our youth and our young adults. from Edmonton to Indonesia to the U of M Menno office. And I attempted to capture some of the goodness of that in the outcomes and ripples in my report. As we continue to walk into 2023, the image for congregational life and health that is sitting with me is laboratory. I'm increasingly convinced that these are the days for some calculated, discerned spirit, nudged experiments. MCM Mondays, which kicked off in January, is a series of online conversations centered on specific congregational ministries and mission. And it is an experiment. We embarked on it, and we are testing it, we're tracking it, we're tweaking it, and we're evaluating it. And the good news is folks from across MCM are showing up, and we are having really good conversations there. So it's great. In my visits and conversations with congregations, I'm hearing, I'm seeing an openness to experimenting. Prompted by our new realities, by our prayer, by our hope. We are changing up the ways we do worship, congregational care, faith formation. Some congregations are considering larger experiments, like seismic shifts in the use of their building, significant moves into the community where they are placed, and allowing ourselves to play radically with new ways of worshiping God. We are reimagining, actually. Brunch Church at Altona, Faith Family Nights at Douglas, Sunday School in the Park for both Home Street and Hope, Sunday service in the basement over at Sargent, post-sermon Q&A for the people at Grace and Steinbach, prayers for each and every MCM congregation during worship at Winnipeg OSIS, a growing network of our youth groups meeting monthly in Winnipeg, building considerations, conversations, here, there, everywhere about that. Spirit's alive, it's well, we're well, and we're working together. And the Spirit is inviting us to experiment. Coming this spring, there will be a gathering at Campus Sinaboya for youth and young adults. And we have called it Living Hope, centering connection. And there, when we gather, we will focus on creating and nurturing connections and holding conversations on the climate. Coming this fall, there will be some new supports for congregations. You'll be happy to hear that. And we are looking for some Anabaptist assessment tools and accompaniment. So we're still shaping that together, but I just want you to know you can call me. We are here to support you in the questions and the wrestlings that you are going through. May our congregations be living labs, right? Moved by the Spirit, experimenting in ways we would have never, ever imagined. Good news is, my friends, this is not a human project, and thanks be to God for that.
Hi, I'm Melanie Neufeld. I'm just completing 1 year as your Director of Mission Engagement. Don't know what that means yet? Let's find out together. I am witness to how congregations are connecting to their local community and caring for their local community. Every 2 weeks, Springsteen Mennonite Church joins with Charleswood Rotary Club, and they are collecting furniture in our MCM offices. They are moving the furniture into new apartments for Ukrainian families. Last year, our local mission grant supported 7 congregations in different projects. Let's hear some of those progress reports. At our last AGM, we heard from Darlene Ence-Dick of Altona and Seeds Church, as she shared about a new idea, the community exchange. Today we'll hear from Cal Funk as he shares a little bit more about their project.
And we now have a community group called the Community Exchange in Altona, Inc. that's made up of community members. And that group, in partnership with Seeds Community, is making use of this facility in a whole new way, where we are opening it up to the community. We're rebranding it as a purely community-based center. The building continues to be owned by Seeds, But we're really looking at it from the standpoint of this happens to be a building that Seeds meets in, but really it's a community-centered building.
Here are two hope-filled pastors from North Kildonan anticipating the spring basketball season.
Here at NKMC, we're excited to have just installed these basketball hoops, as you see behind me, as a way of connecting with the community. The MCM Church grant made it possible for us to have this project go forward, to engage with community members who can now use our parking lot for play and for fun. And we're excited to connect with them as well as other congregation members in some basketball.
This summer, congregations will journey to Cross Lake for the 12th year. It will be a partnership between Sterling, Fort Garry, and they'll be joined by Douglas Mennonite this time. Together we're brainstorming what kind of gift congregations can bring to mark this long-term relationship with Cross Lake. The climate crisis has prompted MC Canada regions to elicit a nationwide response. We are grateful that Sandy Platt has joined the team. The model of faithful climate conversations promoted by our MCM Climate Action Working Group is something I will be learning about in the coming weeks. Sandy and our local COG are ready with resources to encourage congregations to continue the conversation.
About a year ago, leaders from the 5 regional bodies of Mennonite Church Canada got together to initiate a nationwide response to the climate crisis. One result of this conversation is a document called Taking Action on Climate Change, the Eco Mission of the Church in a Critical Time. Maybe you've seen it. Another result of our leaders spending some time thinking about how the church must respond to the climate crisis is that Mennonite Church Canada created a half-time position called Climate Action Coordinator. And that's what brings me here today. I'm Sandy Platt, and I'm so excited to be the first to fill this position. What is my assignment, you ask? My assignment is to work with the church to gain an understanding of the climate crisis and to support and encourage a faithful response to it. I've been at this work for a few months, and here's one thing I've noticed so far. Across this country, people are moving in response to the climate crisis. Different aspects of the crisis move different people, and people move in different ways. 4 out of the 5 regions of Mennonite Church Canada have formed climate-related working groups within the last 2 years. Did you know that? In each region of the country, the working groups have used different words to describe their work. Listen to what these groups have called themselves and consider the perspectives and priorities that these words represent in our midst. Creation Care Resource Team, Climate Action Working Group, Creation Care Task Group, Climate Emergency Response Team. And we also have a national committee called the Sustainability Leadership Group. Who knew there were so many different ways to name this work? Creation Care, Climate Action, Sustainability, and Climate Emergency Response. All these words point to people acting out a faithful response to the climate crisis. Which words resonate with you? Your homework is to find out which is the name of the group in your region. Once you know about your region's group, ask how you can support what they're up to, or how they can support what you're up to. If there isn't a group yet where you are, maybe your gifts could lend themselves to helping you start one. You know, your passions, interests, and skills, the things you're good at. Figure out how your superpowers intersect with the work that needs to be done and offer them up. If you're new to the climate conversation, or not, and want to do some reading on climate, check out the Common Word table here today, or check out Common Word's website. You'll find lots of good resources from educational tools to advocacy strategies and everything in between. If you have ideas for me on how I can support the climate conversation in your region, or how we can build our voice as a national church taking action on climate, please be in touch with me. In all of this work, I'm grateful that climate action is part of our family story, the story of what Mennonite Church Canada is up to in the world. Let's connect our efforts and raise our voices across the country acting out God's love for the earth and all creation in the midst of the climate crisis. Let's walk together with hope and joy into this work.
As Indigenous communities discover unmarked graves at old residential school sites and mourn the loss of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people, the Mennonite Coalition for Indigenous Solidarity is aware we have a long way to go toward reconciliation and repair. Bringing the New Blood performance to Manitoba was one way to continue listening and learning together as we experienced the real images of residential schools. Glad so many of you were able to be witness to the Indigenous dialogue during the talkback.
Greetings. My name is Jonathan Neufeld, your Indigenous Relations Coordinator with Mennonite Church Canada. I have been tasked with supporting the regional Indigenous Relations working groups, being a thought partner and resource as congregations work together to walk a path of reconciliation with Indigenous neighbors. I appreciate the warm welcome I have received from the groups that are underway, and I would like to highlight for you all today one initiative from each region that engages with Call to Action 59, and that is to develop ongoing education strategies to ensure that our congregations learn about our church's role in colonization, the history and legacy of residential schools, and why apologies to former residential school students, their families, and communities were necessary. Such learning strategies are taking many forms. The Manitoba Coalition for Indigenous Solidarity is hosting a public performance of New Blood, featuring poetry, music, contemporary and traditional dance. The show is inspired by the life of Blackfoot Chief Vincent Yellow Old Woman and his experience as a child in residential school, how he reclaimed his way of life and became chief of his people. The Mennonite Church of British Columbia's Indigenous Relations Task Force is preparing for their 8th annual ecumenical walk in the spirit of reconciliation. The walk begins at the Fort Langley Museum, a place that celebrates colonialism, and ends at the site of the former St. Mary's Residential School. They walk in lament and solidarity with First Nations brothers and sisters, remembering the traumatic harm done by residential schools throughout Canada. In Calgary, Mennonite Church Alberta members at Foothills Mennonite Church established Buffalo Shout, a reconciliation group committed to building relationships with Indigenous peoples and confronting the history of colonization, including recently taking the University of Alberta's Indigenous Canada course together. The Mennonite Church of Eastern Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Working Group recently initiated an online book study of Walking Together, a collection of stories from the ministry of Neil and Edith Van Gutten. Their stories invite the church to grapple with questions of racism and Christian supremacy in order to see that all peoples and cultures bear Creator's beauty and gifts, and that our reconciliation depends on embracing that truth. Lastly, Walking the Path from Mennonite Church Saskatchewan has commissioned a new documentary, Custodians, a film about the living library of Indigenous history buried in the pasture land around Herschel, Saskatchewan.
We have things to learn from each other.
It's like a library. We've discovered a living library.
Identifying this stuff is an opportunity, not a problem. It's an opportunity for bridge building.
The documentary raises important questions of land sharing, the conservation of ancient intellectual and spiritual heritage, and respectful Indigenous settler collaboration. This is just a taste of the efforts that are bringing together our church to come alongside Indigenous communities in a good way. You can find out what else is happening in your region by contacting your local working group. Our church family has made covenants to honor Indigenous people's rights. We continue to stand behind those promises and pray that the Spirit will empower the church to live into them. Thank you.
Altona Bergthaler has just joined the Witness Support Network for Ethiopia, where Joanne DeYoung has just given us a newsletter to describe what does Ethiopia smell like? What does Ethiopia sound like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Jeanette Hansen from MC Canada invites us to consider how we can be in mutually transformative relationships as she introduces what the work is in Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand.
Why do you follow Jesus? Has anyone ever asked you that question? I ask that question all the time. When I meet with our family of faith around the world, some who live in places where following Jesus is very costly, I want to know why. In the mountains of Laos, those that choose to follow Jesus are sometimes kicked out of their villages. Their neighbors are afraid because they are no longer sacrificing their best animals to the spirits. Why do they follow Jesus? They almost shouted at me, freedom from fear. One pastor put it very plainly, my children were so afraid of the spirits. I can tell them that Creator God, who made them and everything in the universe, loves them. He said we would drop everything to follow Jesus. In Thailand, urbanization, modernization, and a growing disillusionment with state religion are fraying the edges of society. When meeting with people in the rural area of northeast Thailand that work alongside witness workers, Tom and Christine Puvong, I ask again, why do you follow Jesus? They tell me of families in conflict that have healed relationships, of groups of Jesus followers that work together to promote health in communities, economic health, education, recreation. For them, following Jesus means healing. In the southern island of Mindanao, Philippines, violence related to injustice and ethnic tensions has been part of life for a long time. The Peace Builders community, founded by witness workers Dan and Joji Pantoja, show us irrefutable evidence that following Jesus brings peace. Their peace and reconciliation training is based on principles of harmony with God, harmony with self, harmony with others, including enemies, and harmony with all of creation. As they work at reconciliation between settlers and indigenous people, these principles resonate very closely with the values held dear by both groups. In Myanmar, where violence and civil war are devastating lives, Emmanuel, God with us, in loss and fear, is a compelling message of hope. The formation of communities that support each other during these heart-wrenching upheavals is a comfort. Mennonite congregations there struggled to teach peace. One pastor asked, how do we convince our young people of Jesus' way of peace when their house was just burned down and their town attacked by the military? Pray for peace and cry to God for mercy together with our family of faith in Myanmar. Why do you follow Jesus? Where do you see the reconciling work of God in your life, in your community, in your church? Thank you for your prayers, your actions, and your financial gifts as we witness God's work of reconciliation in the world.
As I am connecting to congregations, I'm discovering there are both individual and organizational mission stories that we may not be familiar with. Documenting and sharing mission stories is one way to understand how Manitobans have been joining in God's mission. Please let me know if you have a story to share. Following Jesus indeed brings healing, peace, and new relationships. Thanks be to God for these encounters of good news.
So get in the boat, it's a fine way to float on the deep sea of life that surrounds you. All together you'll go.
Part of reimagining the church together involves paying attention to where we see God moving. At camp, we see the Spirit at work in many ways.
As I look ahead to this coming summer, I am seeing God at work in the staff who are applying, especially for leadership roles. They are coming back to camp as a place where their faith, however they might frame it, it can be lived out. They are returning to a place where they have felt valued and loved, and where they have felt God's presence and love. And their own sense of that belonging and of faith will spill out onto and into the campers who come each week. I believe camp will be a place this summer where Spirit can rekindle and renew the faith of our young people. So please encourage your youth to consider joining us as staff. Because I also see God at work in the families who are making camp a priority for their kids this summer. Camper registrations are ahead of previous years, and we are excited to welcome them. I believe that camp will continue to be a place where Spirit will spark joy and love in the lives of kids, youth, and adults this summer.
Our rental group program is also bursting at the seams. We have all kinds of groups coming, including school groups, churches, quilters, charitable organizations, and lots of families. Weekends in the lodge are booked solidly right up until November. There are still openings during the week, and weekends in Homewood, Wild Plum, or the Oak Grove cabins are available. So if you want to book a retreat, you're going to have to act quickly. Now is the time for MCM churches to call to book retreats for 2024. That's for next year. A tentative booking gives your church a place in our calendar.
People want to come here because there's so many things to do. People come to enjoy the forest and trails, the friendly farm animals, and other activities that we offer, especially that new ice rink in the barn. They also come to sing, fellowship, and worship. Camp is a place where all things come together. It's a powerful experience that gives us incredible insights into God's creation.
Volunteers are an integral part of our camping ministry, and we're so grateful to have the support of so many. We hope you'll consider joining us for our summer program. If you're interested in volunteering, give the camp office a call or apply online on our website, campswithmeaning.org. Friends are what makes camp fun, and this is true for volunteering as well. Consider getting a group together to help out for a week. There are plenty of positions to fill, and we could use your help for just a few days or even a few weeks. Volunteer with maintenance, in the kitchen, as a camp pastor or health officer.
And while there is plenty of work to do, we also make it fun. In the kitchen, we have a welcoming environment, and if you like Pinterest, you'll love working with us. We're always looking for fun and colorful ways to make mealtimes memorable.
In addition to our summer volunteer program, we have a group of people who help out with maintenance and groundskeeping throughout the year. It's a great group of people who've grown to know and care for each other and who are enthusiastic about this ministry. If you're interested, we'd love to have you as well.
Over these last few minutes, we've been speaking in general terms about the ways that we see the Spirit moving at camp. But there are so many stories. In a regular year, and it looks like this will be one, about 6,000 guests and 600 campers come through our doors. And every one of them leaves a story. So how do we keep this going? As many of you know, we've been reimagining our camping ministry together for a number of years. It's all laid out in the 2015 and 2020 strategic plans that were approved by the MCM delegate body. Although those plans were put on hold over the last few years because of the pandemic, they are still relevant and applicable today. And they point us in a good direction and have held up over time. We are at the stage in our strategic plan where we need to move forward with our capital campaign. This campaign helps us reach some key objectives: to repair and update existing buildings and infrastructure, earn additional revenue in order to become financially sustainable, and provide new programs throughout the year, including a retreat program for church groups, a small gap year program for young adults, and more land-based experiences for campers and guests. Our plans also include building a cabin for families of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited. This camp will be used as a place of respite and ongoing healing. To this end, a capital fundraising team began meeting in late fall of 2022 to start planning. While we will need more people to join us to really make this effort a go, the work has already begun. We hope to start the Quiet campaign and approach businesses this spring. For more information on this and for other camp news, come to our workshop today or visit the Camps with Meaning table. We are looking forward to 2023 with hope, with excitement and enthusiasm. We can't wait to see what's in store. So now we're going to leave you with our summer camp video from last year. Thank you and God bless.
So get in the boat, it's a fine way to float on the deep sea of life that surrounds you. All together you'll go through our seas, you will row with Jesus, the captain beside you. Let Jesus be captain beside you. Oh, Jesus, he slept as the storm did rage. His disciples were sorely afraid. They shook him awake, we are lost, they said. At his word all the winds did fade. So get in the boat, it's a fine way to float on the deep sea of life that surrounds you. All together you'll go through our seas, you will row with Jesus, the captain beside you. Let Jesus be captain beside you. When charting your path, do your best, my friends, to set sail in the way of the Christ, who will be your light in the dead of night, and make sure all your knots stay tight. So get in the boat, it's a fine way to float on the deep sea of life that surrounds you. All together you'll go through rough seas, you will row with Jesus, the captain beside you. Let Jesus be captain beside you. Oh, building a boat takes a sailor's zeal, and we practice it every day. We learn with our friends as our nets we mend, navigating the Jesus way. So get in the boat, it's a fine way to float on the deep sea of life that surrounds you. All together you'll go through rough seas, you will row with Jesus, the captain beside you. Let Jesus be captain beside you.
Hello, I'm Arlen, and welcome to Common Word, your bookstore and resource center. Part of the genius of Common Word is the synergy between retailing and resourcing. Whether you need a good book to borrow, a small group study to purchase, or a worship resource to download, you can find it all here in one location, in English or many other languages. And that's significant, because while there's no shortage of Christian resources in Canada, Google can help you find 1 million of them, Common Word can help you find the right one to buy, borrow, or access online. Our staff are knowledgeable and work diligently to source and make available those specific Anabaptist and related resources you need. Resources to inspire, equip, provoke, and engage you and your congregations in discipleship, peacemaking, and reconciliation, and other core practices of our Mennonite faith. As the pandemic restrictions ease and congregational patterns are reimagined, as you engage the critical issues of climate change, Indigenous settler relations, the intercultural church, and many other important agenda, as you worship, study, discern, and grow, check in with Common Word for essential resources that can help shape your personal and congregational journeys. Our loan items ship free to your home and back to Winnipeg.
Our digital resources, including thousands of Together in Worship materials, are free, and our retail titles are all competitively priced. So I invite you to study our quarterly Common Read title, borrow a congregational display, join an online book launch or author conversation, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, subscribe to our bi-weekly curator email, embed an RSS feed on your congregation's website, and of course, keep reading. In 2022, we processed almost 800 online orders, over 7,500 in-store purchases, over 2,400 loans, and nearly 20,000 downloads. Thank you for your engagement, and thank you for your support and ongoing commitment to Christian formation. We value the relationship we have with you and look forward to serving you in the year ahead. So let's stay in touch. Our contact information is in the report book and at commonword.ca. Thank you.